minimalism, frugality, extreme budgeting. Are these really the only options for paying off debt on a low income? Absolutely not. Most financial experts make it sound like the only way to get out of debt is to cut everything fun and live off of beans and rice. But let's be real, that's not sustainable. The truth is, debt payoff doesn't have to feel miserable. Cutting out every fun expense won't guarantee success, but there is a smarter way to eliminate debt, set yourself up for long-term success, and still have room in your budget for the things you enjoy. If you're living on a low income and trying to pay off debt, the first thing most financial experts will tell you is to cut everything. Stop eating out, cancel every subscription, and basically live like a hermit until you're debt-free. But let's be honest. How long can you really sustain that? Studies show that most extreme budgeters quit within 6 months because constant deprivation isn't realistic. How long do you think you'd make it living like that before you broke down and ended up blowing your budget on a bunch of stuff you don't need or didn't intend to buy simply because depriving yourself got to be too much for you? For me personally, I'd only make it a couple of months if I was lucky. Then I'd feel bad for telling the kids no one too many times, or I'd need something for myself, and instead of buying that one thing that might have been $5 to $10, I'd end up spending 50 or maybe more so that I would have it for later or some other plausible excuse. Hey everyone, I'm Rose Colburn, and I'm here to help you take control of your personal finances so you can create a life you truly love. I keep financial freedom real, attainable, and BS free because no one should feel like wealth is out of reach. If you're tired of financial advice that sounds good but doesn't actually work in real life, you're in the right place. I know I'm not the only one who's felt this way with the extreme budgeting trap. This all or nothing approach to budgeting is why so many people struggle to stick with a debt payoff plan. I've seen it happen time and time again. People go all in, cutting every little expense, only to burn out, feel exhausted, and eventually fall back into old habits. The truth is, you don't have to live miserably to get out of debt. The key isn't about cutting everything. It's about being intentional with where your money goes. Instead of focusing on deprivation, focus on sustainability, because the best budget is the one you can actually stick to. So how do you balance debt payoff while still having a life? One of the biggest reasons people struggle with debt payoff is because they aren't prepared for the little things or even the big things that come up. When you don't have savings set aside, a simple unexpected drop in your income can completely derail your progress, forcing you to take on more debt just to get by. And here's where most people go wrong. When money is tight, it's tempting to go all in on debt payoff, cutting out everything possible in an effort to get rid of the debt as fast as possible so they have money to live, money for their basic everyday expenses. But that approach almost never works, not in the long term. Think about it. Have you ever started a strict diet, cutting out all your favorite foods? You might stick with it for a little while, but eventually you hit a breaking point and one cheat meal turns into a full-blown binge. Then you feel guilty and the cycle starts all over again. Debt payoff works the same way. If you strip your budget down to nothing, leaving yourself zero breathing room, you're going to hit a point where you just can't keep going. And when that happens, most people either burn out, they start resenting their financial goals, or worse, they end up back in debt because they didn't create a plan that was actually sustainable. And before we go any further, let's address something important, because I know some of you are thinking, what if my income is so low that I can barely afford my basic expenses, let alone debt? The hard truth is you can only cut back so much before there's nothing left to cut. If your income isn't enough to cover essentials or allow for even small debt payments, you don't have a spending problem, you have an income problem. And that's something that a lot of experts don't cover in their YouTube videos. Now, if you're dealing with this temporary low-income situation, like a job loss, maybe an injury at work where you're now relying on unemployment for a while, or even just a tough financial season, you might just need a strategy to make things work in the short term. But if you've been stuck at the same income level for a long time, at some point, the reality is you have to focus on increasing your income. And I'll be covering that in another video. But for now, let's focus on what you can do with the income that you have right now. Because balance is what makes debt payoff possible, even when money is tight. So before you can make any real progress, you need to know exactly how much you need to survive without feeling miserable and how much you have to work with. So instead of going all in on debt payoff at the expense of everything else, make sure your basic needs are covered. Start by listing your absolute essential expenses: rent or mortgage, food, utilities, transportation, and minimum debt payments. These are your 5 non-negotiable baselines, the minimum amount that you must cover to keep life running. If your budget is already tight, this is where you focus on cutting costs without cutting quality of life. For example, meal planning instead of eating out. Maybe you want to try a freezer or pantry challenge where you use as much of what you already have when planning your grocery shopping. Another thing you might want to consider is setting up a payment plan or negotiating bills to free up some extra cash. Next, you need to list all your sources of income: your wages, money from side gigs, child support, alimony, and any savings you might have that you can safely tap into. But you need to keep in mind how long that will last before it runs out. But what if your bare minimum budget exceeds your income? In some cases, you may qualify for assistance programs, but many of them have strict income limits, and the frustrating reality is that while your income might be too low to meet your expenses, it also might be too high to qualify for help. So if you've already done everything you can to cut expenses, then this is where you may need to shift focus to increasing your income, even if it's just temporary. Paying off debt on a low income doesn't mean constantly struggling, and it definitely doesn't mean cutting out every little thing that brings you joy. Total deprivation leads to burnout. If cutting everything makes you miserable, you won't stick with it. After you've covered your essential expenses, you need to give yourself permission to set aside a small amount of money for things that make life enjoyable. Look at what you have left after covering necessities. Set a minimum and a maximum amount of what I call joy spending based on your situation. And you can adjust this from month to month. Maybe it's $10 one month and $50 another. This just depends on what's realistic for you. So here's what I did when I was in this situation. I made sure to always give myself at least $10 per paycheck, but never more than $50, even in the better months. That way, when my income fluctuated, I could increase my lifestyle spending just a little while still putting more toward debt whenever possible. So choose 1 or 2 affordable things that bring you happiness, whether it's coffee once a week or a low-cost streaming service. What's important is that there is steady progress, because steady progress beats extreme sacrifice. When you build in small, intentional spending, you will avoid burnout and actually stick to your plan. So now that you have your survival budget set and have some breathing room, it's time to figure out how much extra, if any, you can put toward debt each month. You don't have to throw every extra penny at debt. In fact, that's often a mistake when money is tight. Instead, focus on consistency. Even if it's just making the minimum payments, put a little extra in whenever possible. Remember, minimum payments are already included in your essential expenses. So this step is about extra debt payments. So there's a few strategies for you to consider based on your situation. If you have even a small amount of money left, set a consistent amount. Even $25 to $50 extra per month makes a huge difference. If your budget is tight and there's nothing extra, then just maintain your minimum payments while looking for small ways to free up cash. And remember, this is after setting aside a small amount for your mental well-being. And again, if there's absolutely nothing left, even after giving yourself a little spending money, then it's time to consider increasing your income unless this is just a short-term setback. And the last strategy is if your income is unstable, then in that case, use a flexible payoff approach. Pay the minimum during low-income months, then throw a little bit extra toward debt when you have more income. This strategy keeps you consistent, and consistency is the real key to long-term debt payoff. Now, this next step is an extra bonus. It's something to consider if you have even a little money left over after covering the essentials, setting aside joy spending, and making your extra debt payments. And that is to set aside a little each month in a purposeful savings fund for upcoming expenses like car maintenance, medical costs, or yearly bills. Instead of stressing over building a massive savings fund right now, start small. Even a little savings can keep you from falling back into debt when life happens. But if you don't have room in your budget right now, that's okay. Focus on the 3 balance steps first, and purposeful savings can come later. These 4 steps are a simplified version of the lifestyle budgeting framework that I use when I work with my coaching clients. And inside my upcoming group coaching program, I walk you through exactly how to build a budget that works for your unique situation, and even when you're on a low income. And I actually just finished filming the in-depth version of this lifestyle budgeting framework right before creating this video, so I'm kind of excited to share it with you when the program actually launches. But what I want you to know right now is that you don't have to live paycheck to paycheck forever. And if you're in a situation where you have a low income right now, you don't have to give up everything you love to become debt-free. If you hit a setback, simply make some adjustments, but most importantly, don't quit. Getting out of debt on a low income is tough, but it's not impossible. The key is creating a system that works for you and then sticking with it rather than trying to force yourself into a budgeting style that just isn't sustainable. Focus on creating balance, steady progress, and realistic debt payments, and this will set you up for success without the burnout. Remember, financial freedom doesn't come at the price of depriving yourself of the joy there is in life. Now, if you want to start paying off your debt as quickly as possible, watch this next video. And thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next video.